There's a moment a lot of Kohl's shoppers hit, usually while standing at the customer service counter holding something they're sure won't be accepted back, where they find out the return goes through without much trouble at all. It's not a secret Kohl's is hiding, and it's not buried in fine print designed to trick anyone. It's just a policy generous enough that most shoppers assume it must have more restrictions than it actually does, especially compared to other stores that have trained people to expect a tight 30-day window and nothing more. Some of these shoppers have been walking the same aisles for years, returning the occasional shirt or pair of shoes without much thought, and still never learned the full shape of what the policy actually allows. Kohl's gives most shoppers 90 days to return an item, simply using a regular credit card, debit card, or cash at checkout. Anyone who pays with a Kohl's card specifically gets an extra 30 days on top of that, stretching the window to a full 120 days from the original purchase. A retiree who bought a sweater in early spring and only got around to deciding it wasn't quite right months later might still be well within that window, especially if a Kohl's card was used, since 120 days covers far more ground than most people assume a department store would ever allow. Not having a receipt isn't the dead end it feels like either. Kohl's can typically look up a purchase through the card used, a Kohl's rewards account tied to a phone number, the original order number, or a barcode inside the Kohl's app, often pulling up the transaction in seconds without a single piece of paper involved. If none of those lookup methods turn up anything at all, Kohl's still generally accepts the return, just at the lowest price the item sold for over the past 13 weeks, issued as merchandise credit rather than cash, and a valid photo ID is usually required to process it. Someone who tossed a receipt the same day they got home, assuming a lost slip of paper meant a lost return, is often surprised to learn the system already had their purchase on file the entire time. It's worth knowing this wasn't always the shape of the policy, since plenty of longtime Kohl's shoppers are still operating on outdated memory. For years, Kohl's ran what amounted to a no-deadline return policy, with effectively no expiration on most items at all. That changed to the current 90 and 120-day structure, which is still generous compared to most retailers, but represents a real shift from what older customers may remember from shopping there a decade ago. A shopper who avoided returning something because they assumed too much time had passed, based on rules that applied years ago, might be surprised that 90 or even 120 days still covers the situation comfortably. A handful of categories move faster than the standard window, and missing this exception is exactly where shoppers lose out rather than gain extra time. Premium electronics, watches, and Sephora at Kohl's beauty products all carry a much tighter 30-day return window, requiring the original packaging and a receipt or account lookup for electronics and watches specifically. Someone who buys a smartwatch, sets it aside unused for 6 weeks, while deciding whether they like it, can easily miss that shorter deadline without realizing the standard 90-day rule never applied to that particular item in the first place. Holiday shopping adds its own extension on top of the standard window, and missing it means losing time that was actually still available. Items purchased in the lead-up to the holidays, roughly from early October through the end of December, get pushed onto an extended deadline that runs through January 31st of the following year, regardless of where the standard 90 or 120-day count would have landed otherwise. Kohl's specifically honors whichever window ends up longer, the standard policy or the holiday extension, so a purchase made on a Kohl's card in early December could end up covered well past March under the normal rules anyway, while a cash purchase from the same week leans on the holiday extension instead. Either way, the practical result is the same. Holiday purchases get noticeably more breathing room than a quick glance at the receipt date might suggest. Gift returns carry a slightly different shape worth understanding before assuming a gift recipient is stuck with something they don't want. With a gift receipt in hand, the recipient can typically get a merchandise credit at the price that was actually paid, or choose to exchange the item instead, without ever needing to involve whoever originally bought it. Without that gift receipt, the credit drops down to the lowest price the item sold for over the past 13 weeks, the same reduced standard that applies to any no-receipt return, which makes hanging onto that small slip of paper worth the effort for anyone planning to give a Kohl's purchase as a gift. Large furniture and appliances delivered through Kohl's threshold delivery service follow a different set of rules entirely, separate from anything bought and carried out of the store directly. These deliveries can come with a restocking fee, often around 15%, if returned for reasons other than a defect or shipping damage, which is a detail that catches people off guard if they assume every return at Kohl's works exactly the same way, regardless of size or delivery method. A shopper expecting a full refund on a couch that simply didn't fit their living room the way they pictured may be surprised by that fee, while the same fee gets waived entirely if the issue was genuinely Kohl's fault, like damage that occurred during delivery. Even purchases made somewhere else can sometimes land back at Kohl's, through its partnership allowing Amazon returns at most physical locations. A shopper who ordered something through Amazon decided it wasn't right and dreads repackaging it for a shipping label can often start that return through Amazon's own online return center, select the Kohl's drop-off option, and hand the unboxed item directly to an associate in-store instead. No box or label required on the shopper's end at all. It's a convenience that has nothing to do with anything actually purchased at Kohl's, yet plenty of regular Kohl's shoppers have never connected the dots that their nearest location doubles as an Amazon return point too. Kohl's Cash adds a layer of math that catches plenty of shoppers off guard during a return, even when the return itself goes through without issue. If a purchase earned Kohl's Cash, and that cash has already been spent on something else, returning the original item means the refund comes back reduced by however much of that bonus cash was used, since the store is essentially recovering a discount that's already been claimed elsewhere. A shopper expecting a full refund on a $50 item, not realizing $10 of Kohl's Cash from that same purchase already went toward a candle the next aisle over, ends up confused at the counter when the number doesn't match what they paid. Signing up for the free Kohl's Rewards program, even for someone who never plans to use Kohl's Cash specifically, makes every one of these situations easier to navigate. The program costs nothing, takes only a couple of minutes to join, and creates a running purchase history tied to a phone number or email, which means a future return can be looked up instantly without ever needing to dig through a wallet or an inbox for a receipt. Plenty of regular Kohl's shoppers skip this simply because they don't see themselves as the type of customer who collects rewards points, never realizing the real value here has less to do with points and everything to do with making returns effortless months down the line. Refund timing itself follows a fairly predictable pattern, though it surprises people expecting an instant turnaround the way an in-store cash refund works. In-store returns processed with a card typically show up on a statement within 1 to 7 business days, depending entirely on the bank or card issuer rather than anything Kohl's controls directly. Mail-in returns take considerably longer, since the item has to physically arrive back at a return center, get inspected, and get logged before any refund triggers at all, a process that can stretch out to roughly 30 days from the day Kohl's actually receives the package. Someone expecting a mailed return to move at the same pace as an in-store one is often left wondering why nothing's shown up yet, when in reality the timeline was simply never going to match an in-person return to begin with. It's worth sitting with how ordinary all of this actually is. There's no villain in this story, no employee deliberately withholding information out of malice. Most associates at the customer service counter would explain any one of these details honestly the moment a shopper asked a direct question. The real cost here isn't deception. It's simply that a policy this detailed, covering everything from holiday timing to delivery fees to gift receipts, rarely gets summarized for a customer in one sitting, since most interactions only ever touch the one specific rule relevant to whatever's being returned that day. This is also exactly why the most frequent Kohl's shoppers, the ones who've been walking in for birthday sales and seasonal clearance events for a decade, are often the ones carrying the most outdated assumptions. A shopper who had one frustrating return years ago, back when the policy looked different or before a particular exception existed, tends to lock that experience in as the general rule going forward, rarely circling back to check whether anything's actually changed since. Someone still operating on memories of Kohl's forever no deadline policy from years ago might avoid returning something today simply because they vaguely remember rules being stricter now, without realizing 90 or 120 days still covers the vast majority of situations comfortably. What ties all of this together is how much more flexible Kohl's actually is compared to what most shoppers assume walking in. None of this requires gaming the system or knowing some hidden trick. It's simply a policy detailed enough and generous enough by retail standards that the version living in most people's heads is stricter than the version actually posted at the customer service desk. A 90 or 120-day window, multiple ways to look up a purchase without a receipt, and a free rewards program that makes the whole process smoother are all sitting there for anyone willing to ask, rather than assume. For someone newer to shopping at Kohl's, or even someone who's been a regular for years without ever questioning the process, the fix here isn't complicated. It's a short list of things worth checking before assuming a return won't work. Whether the 120-day window applies because a Kohl's card was used, whether any of the no-receipt lookup methods can find the purchase, whether a gift receipt is sitting somewhere worth digging out before a return goes through at reduced value, and whether an Amazon return could be dropped off at the same trip instead of mailed separately. None of it requires a trick or a workaround, just a willingness to ask the question rather than assume the strictest possible version of the policy applies. It also helps to think about returns less as a rare, stressful event and more as a routine part of shopping anywhere, the same way checking a price tag or comparing two sizes is routine. Signing up for the free Kohl's Rewards program before a return ever becomes necessary means the purchase history is already sitting there waiting, rather than scrambling to remember which card was used or digging through email for an order confirmation after the fact. The shoppers who navigate this most smoothly aren't the ones with special knowledge. They're simply the ones who treat their own purchase history as something worth keeping track of, rather than something to piece together after the fact, under pressure at a counter. If this is the first time you're hearing the actual details of this policy, you're already ahead of where most shoppers find out, usually mid-return, holding an item they were sure would get rejected. The broader lesson here extends well past Kohl's specifically, since most large retailers run some version of these same layered rules: a standard window, a cardholder extension, a holiday exception, a different process for gifts and large deliveries. The details shift from one store to the next, but the habit that actually saves time and frustration stays consistent everywhere. Read the actual policy once, ask a direct question when something seems unclear, and don't assume the strictest version automatically applies just because it would somewhere else. Premium electronics specifically come with one more wrinkle worth knowing before a return gets attempted. Beyond the shorter 30-day window, these returns typically require the original packaging, manuals, and any included accessories to be intact, and missing pieces can either reduce the refund amount or result in the return being declined outright. Someone who tossed the box for a soundbar weeks ago, assuming the device itself was all that mattered, might find that decision working against them if a return becomes necessary later, since the packaging itself functions almost like a second receipt in how strictly it gets checked for this particular category. Let us know in the comments which detail surprised you most, whether it was the 120-day window with a Kohl's card, the no-receipt lookup options, or the Kohl's cash deduction nobody explains in advance. And if this saved you a frustrated trip to the store today, subscribing means the next one of these reaches you before you've already given up on a return that would have gone through just fine.